would feel strongly about jihad, having been deprived of leadership and affiliation with Islam of the type that they had hoped to have through Ali.
During the Iran-Iraq War, someone who spoke at KU said that you had these two groups of Muslims fighting each other as a jihad, but he did say what you just said, that the jihad was internal. What should I be doing, even on the battlefield?
Right. The Prophet Muhammad is known to have returned home from a battle, and he said, "We have returned from the lesser jihad to the greater jihad," meaning the effort to keep your ego at bay is much harder than going out there and killing someone on the battlefield, because it's a moment-to-moment, constant struggle to avoid satisfying the physical part of you. So the Umayyad dynasty in Damascus lasted until 750. Muawiyah and his successors in his family line created exactly the kind of tribal dynasty that Islam had set out to abolish. But then other people were power hungry, so they came along and slaughtered everybody, except one person in this family who made his way to southern Spain, where his mother had been from. And he established 500 years of ecumenical peace. He didn't live that long, but he established a dynasty where there were in Al-Andalus Muslims, Jews, and Christians living together. And if you want a wonderful historical read on that, it's called The Ornament of the World, and that's on your reading list as well. So this is the Umayyad dynasty, the extent of it. And then along comes the Abbasid Caliphate, named after Muhammad's youngest uncle. So descendants of his overthrew Muawiyah and all of Muawiyah's relatives. And they moved this next dynasty, this caliphate, to Baghdad, where it remained from 750 until 1517. Now, this is the extent of the Abbasid Caliphate and the golden years of Islam, with Shahrazad and the dancing girls and all of that you see in the movies and books, was that period, 850 to 1050. Then the Mongols started to invade and things went downhill. Now there followed many other caliphates, but you may only have heard of the Ottoman Empire, which sort of picks up a little bit after the end of the Abbasid Caliphate. And it has its palace intrigues, and also we have the focus of Islam in Turkey, in what is now Istanbul. And that, of course, lasted until just before World War I.
We have heard of the caliphate just now with ISIS in Mosul.
I'm getting there. You've read my mind. So, here are other caliphates. I'm sorry I didn't change the color on the font, which you can't read very easily. It says non-ecumenical medieval caliphates, the Fatimid caliphs, 909 to 1171, Almohad caliphates in northern Morocco, 1145 to 1269, the Ottoman caliphates, 1362 to 1924. And then various other caliphates have been declared after 1900. The Sharifian Caliphate in 1924, Ahmadiyya Caliphate 1908 to present, and ISIL. So you can see by this list that anybody can claim to be establishing a caliphate. So when ISIL or ISIS says they have caliphate, oh, says who? Well, says them. It doesn't mean they're good guys. It doesn't mean it's a caliphate sanctioned by anybody else. And as everything in history has shown, governments rarely demonstrate the qualities of piety that were intended at the origins of Islam. Now here we get to the third S, Sufis. Because Sufis understand this, that they want to avoid this involvement in a worldly focus. So, who are the Sufis? Are they mystics? Are they hyper-spiritual Muslims? I like that one. Spiritual egalitarians, the Sufis say the soul has no gender. So Sufi groups welcome women on an equal basis, as it was supposed to be. Sufis now can be either Sunni or Shia. In fact, Sufism began among the Shia, who sought to preserve the original tenets of Islam, the Quran, the pillars, and the Sunnah, in the focus on a Sufi, prayerful observance of Islam, apart from government. And now, however, there are more Sunnis who are Sufis than Shia, simply because there are more Sunnis in the world than there are Shia. So there are hundreds of different Sufi brotherhoods named after the first teacher of the ever-widening group. For instance, the Qadariyya and the Tijaniya are two of the largest. So you know about the whirling dervishes of Turkey. That's one brotherhood of Sufis. Some just don't whirl, they sit around for prayer, like these in India. There are Sufis in China, many Muslims in China. We don't think about that. The weak are, right? There are American Sufis all over the United States. These are some in Los Angeles, some in Hartford, Connecticut. So the people I work with. In some countries, especially Morocco, there are tombs of Sufi saints, which are places where people go to pray and study. They don't pray to the saint. They pray in the proximity of the remains of a saintly person. And these tombs are as numerous for women as they are for men. So here are some examples. Oh, in a minute, we'll get to them. In Nigeria, a Sufi, not a Sufi saint, but a Sufi, a woman I've written a lot about, was a teacher and a poet and a scholar. She was prolific. Her material is something that Sufis in this country use today. At Harvard, to give a lecture, the Sultan of Sokoto in Nigeria, Saadu Abubakar, is the great-great-grandson of that woman. And he's very proud of his ancestor. And he promotes women's education. So obviously Boko Haram does not agree with the Sultan of Sokoto. They're in Nigeria as well. But they're the ones who are saying women can't be educated. So here are the tombs of Sufi saints in Morocco. Some, just a few to show you examples. She's not really there on top of the table. She's buried under the ground, but this marks the spot. Okay. So, beyond the Sunni-Shia split and Sufi groups, there are many smaller regional groups of Muslims with their own customs, just as is the case for Christianity and Judaism. And for all Muslims, the foundational beliefs of the Quran, the Sunnah, and the pillars are shared in common. So this is the last slide I have for today. And I wanted to say that the 3 S's are the most important things for you to know about Islam in terms of groups. But when you hear of other factions, like ISIS or Boko Haram, these are just criminal groups. These are death cults. And we have them in other religions as well. There may be other more pious groups regionally, but they will differ from area to area, and way too many for me to even know or to explain to you today. But if you have questions now, I'll be happy to take some. Did you have a question?
Just more than you can handle in time. But I had a stunning conversation with a friend recently who reads a lot, and I have great respect for his intelligence, and all of a sudden he took out after Islam. when I said something about it spreading so rapidly. How can it spread so rapidly if there isn't something to it? He said, because they will be killed if they don't convert. And, I didn't know how to refute that because way back in the late 80s, when whatever was going on with terrorist kinds of stuff, I was living in the D.C. area at the time, and I thought, boy, I need to learn more about Islam so that I can neutralize the thinking that is going to say that all of Islam is terrorist attack. And so I appreciate so much being able to hear what you have to say. I also have a friend who is from Iran, although he is Armenian and Christian, who has told me a number of things about his understanding of Islam. And he said that Muhammad's wife's father was a general and had something to do with the idea that Islam could only be spread through the sword kind of thing. That's not anything.
That's pure poppycock.
Yeah. Well, lots of people are misled by things that they take as being true. Should I share with you some of the other things?
Sure. Let me just address some of these points.
Yes.
No, I've been studying about Islam for 35 years, and I've never read anything about one of his wives' fathers being a general and promoting warfare. No, that's crazy. But this whole idea that Islam is a religion of the sword is spin that was begun by Pope Urban II and King Louis for the First Crusade. And amazingly, unbelievably, that spin, those misconceptions continue to this day. And I always say to my students, oh yeah, that's a good way to spread a doctrine. You come in, you kill all the men, and then you say to the widows and the orphans, oh, now won't you join our religion? It's like, people are not stupid. They're not going to do something that's not good for them. And Islam requires a non-judgmental attitude toward other people. And one of the most often repeated phrases in Islam is, and this is from the Quran, let there be no compulsion, no forcing people in religion. So the idea is never to force anything on people. And the people I lived among in northern Nigeria follow this. I knew one of the women in the Emir's palace I was going to visit for a year and a half before we had any discussion about religion, and I said to her, why have we never talked about religion? She said, well, it's not my place. If you ask me, I'll be happy to answer. But there's no reason for me to talk about religion unless you are interested.
Proselytizing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, can I come back to you? Okay, yes.
I was just wondering, like in Saudi Arabia, they don't allow women to drive until recently. I mean, that's some perverted.
Yeah, it is perverted. You raise a really important question, because those are Wahhabi Muslims. And the Wahhabis did not even exist until the 19th century. There was a preacher named Wahhab. He was very conservative when he died. He lived from the 1700s, I think 1720, until the very end of that century. And when he died at the beginning of the 19th century, his followers began to codify his lessons. And they became the Wahhabis, who are radically paternalistic, patriarchal, and they are the teachers of bin Laden. So they're not good guys, and they don't date back to the origins of Islam. This is a new way of interpreting Islam. So we just kind of put them out there in some marginal area. Yeah, it's not a good thing that they don't permit women
Okay,
to.
thanks.
Yeah,
Do the
you're
ter-
right.
Do the terms conservative and liberal have any application in all?
Yeah, well, if we wanted to apply conservative and liberal, we would say that Wahhabis are the most extreme, spectacular example of conservative people in Islam, and the Sufis are the most liberal. The reason that Sufism was hidden and secret for so many years was that the Sufis kind of don't worry about the 5 major schools of jurisprudence. They don't worry about the law. They're very accepting, they're very egalitarian. And for that reason, people who have a lot to lose by not having everybody follow the rules want to get rid of them. They're like the hippies of the Islamic movement. And so they're the most liberal, I would say. Every brotherhood. Yes.
2 things. Last semester, maybe this, in the law school at KU, a man teaches Sharia law. When is Ramadan this year? Do you know when it begins?
Yes. I believe it begins the end of May. I think
End of May. What I wanted to
21st.
say is last year I went to the city commission for Ramadan to have them proclaim Ramadan. They said they couldn't because it's a religion. They can't certify a religion. But everyone here, everyone in Lawrence is invited to come to the Islamic Center at 19th and Naismith at sundown during the 28 days of Ramadan to have the evening meal, the iftar evening meal. You're all welcome. I was there a few times last year. A lot of KU students are there. They go down to the basement and have this huge free meal every night during Ramadan. Please come.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
I've made a study of the world's great religions. I got started when I was a student at KU and really got rolling 40-some years ago through a journal called Parabola. And I've been immensely blessed. But one thing that has always attracted me about Islam is that they practice what was originally the essence. And when they kneel in prayer, they're surrendering their ego, aren't they?
Yes.
And believe me, by my careful observation of all world religions, ego is the main problem.
Right.
And so I appreciate Islam just because they get down and surrender their ego to God. And that's an amazing accomplishment.
It is. That's a really important point, and that's what I appreciate about Islam too. And so following on that, 2 things before I forget. In case there's only one book you want to read on Islam, don't be afraid of Islam for Dummies. I've read it. It's beautifully done. It's not sacrilegious at all. You know, you might think, oh, it can be for dummies, but it really gives the essence. But following on what you said, I just came across a book by Jonathan Haidt called The Righteous Mind, and he's talking about conservatives and liberals in this country, the recent election, all of that. But early in the book, on page 17, he talks about 2 ways of understanding your role in society. There's the sociocentric and the individual-centric. And he said ancient societies were individual-centric. And around the time of the Enlightenment, there came a shift to sociocentric. So, no, it's the opposite. I'm sorry, I screwed it up. The ancients felt that one should be sociocentric, and around the Enlightenment, with the focus on the individual, it became individual-centric, and that's how we are now. So even places like Norway and Sweden that appear to be socialist, they really are satisfying the needs of the individual through government contributions or whatever. And suddenly a light bulb went off for me, and I went, oi, this is the conflict with people in the West who are not Muslim understanding Islam. Because Islam is sociocentric. The needs of the community are important, and your function should be to help the community. And I've always taught that there is this interesting dual responsibility in Islam. You have a responsibility to your community, But your responsibility to God is individual. Nobody else is responsible for your actions except you. There's a saying, God is as close as the jugular in your neck. No confessor, priests, no pope to tell you what to do, none of that. And when I read this in this book recently, I went, oh, that's why people can't understand that the communal sense of taking care of one another, feeding one another. If you live in or near a Muslim community or near neighbors who are Muslim in this community, they'll be feeding you all the time. They'll be giving you literally the shirt off their back, because the pillar of charity says that whatever I am or have comes from God and is not mine to keep. So if somebody else needs it, then you need to give it away. So I suddenly understood that within this obligation to community, there is the individual responsibility to God, but the focus is on the community, as opposed to the egocentric views that our democracy has. Because this was a problem for me. A democracy should be concerned with the welfare of all.
Yeah.
But we are more focused on individual satisfactions. And this is what creates a lot of the difficulty in Congress, in our neighborhoods, in our classrooms. So it was an interesting perspective. I don't know if that's of use.
Did I find your hot button?
No, wait, are you
Did I
not?
find your hot button?
You did. You did. Thank you.
Muslims have told me that they have a more direct connection to God than Christians do. Like you just said, we don't have the Pope, we
Yeah,
have the
there's
Pope and Jesus.
a more direct connection to God. Yeah, there's no institutional requirement. You go and pray and you're talking directly to God. And you're the only one responsible. You can't blame it on anybody else. And I know we're way beyond time. So I'm sorry, I think I need to stop, but I will stay here for as long as you have questions. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you very much.
You could say, don't kill me.